So, Joy, thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate it. Um, yeah, I love what you do on Instagram. I mean, you have a ton of content. It's extremely, extremely helpful, and it's opened my eyes quite a bit to different ways of thinking in terms of being a musician and performing on stage. But I was just wondering if you could start out by talking about artist development is character development. I heard you say that in one of your videos, and that was extremely intriguing. So, talk about developing the character side of and that ending up helping you on stage.
Yeah. Uh, what a great question. So I look at the development of artists and musicians as an inside out job as opposed to an outside in. So instead of building up your technique like in a mechanical way, you're coming from the being instead of the doing first. And you're finding your place in the center of like one of the first things I tell my clients and my singers that I work with is I don't want you to think of this as singing. I want you to think of this as communicating. So if you're communicating something, you're coming from a point of view and you have an intention to create an effect using your communication. So as Shakespeare said, all the world's a stage. It's like our role on this planet in our lives is to be who we're here to be. And so if you look at creating a character that is you, your ultimate highest self, making all of the best choices that you can make from your inner moral compass, from your inner gauge of what the ultimate person would be, stepping into that hero, right? And allowing yourself to surrender to the hero's journey, which is always a bumpy ride, is how you is the origin, is the epicenter of who you become as an artist from my perspective, from my ideology and philosophy of art and music, is like, who am I really here to be? And what do I need to say in order to fulfill that prophecy, in order to fulfill that purpose? Um, and that informs what you do with your voice and how your voice comes out of your body. And then it's almost like you create a sketch of what that superhero would look like, and you can build on it. So you can exaggerate certain aspects of it. You can create the visual identity and the backstories and, the iconic presence from the organic grounding of the truth of who you really are at your core and who you aspire to be, instead of just some contrived, oh, well, why don't we just put a hat on you and make that your signature silhouette, and that's kind of your logo brand type of situation. And I'm sure that works too really well from a commercial perspective, but from my perspective as an artist, not only as a singer and musician, but as an artist mentor, it's like, be the most extraordinary you that you can be is the most fun you can have in life, even though it's the hardest thing you can do. And then let your musical identity be born out of that.
hmm So, in a sense, to be great on stage, you don't need to become a different person. You need to become more yourself,
Mm,
basically.
that's it in a nutshell.
hmm
It's the exact
hmm
perfect way to say it. Like, the more authentic you become as a human being, the more rich your relationships are, the better you communicate, the better you connect, the more confidence you have. And that's everything you want as an artist. And it's everything you want as a human being, because we all want that connection and that love and that freedom to be and to express without hiding or pretending. And it also um, cancels imposter syndrome. It cancels that feeling of not being enough and wondering what everyone's thinking of you, because it's non-negotiable. It is you. You're celebrating it. You're developing it. You're breathing life into it every day. And what could be freer than that?
hmm And how does that process work? I mean, so say you feel like you're not there yet, or you're not anywhere near there. How do you begin the process to get there?
Hmm. Mm. Wow. Okay, let me break that down. So most of us are in what I refer to as room A, and that's a perspective. I have these 3 rooms. And room A is you're watching yourself from the outside when it comes to being a performer or someone who offers up this intimate gift, right, from self, from source, is instead of staying in the center of ourselves, like the sun shining, where somehow we leave the captain's chair, we go outside and we watch ourselves and imagine what we look like from other people's point of view, and it's imaginary. So the first thing that I teach people is, first of all, how to recognize when you slip into room A. You're watching yourself. You're disembodied. You're an observer now, right? So just recognizing that in the first place is the first step, and it's wonderful because you're like, oh, that's what's happening. I finally understand why I feel so nervous and so out of control. The second thing is to recognize that in order to not be in room A, to be in room B, where you can just be yourself, is you have to get back into the captain's chair, and you have to be like a child just looking out with curiosity, right? And what does a child do? They're curious until they find something that they want to focus on. And then they just focus on it, and they just are curious about it, and they discover it, and they explore it, and they become connected to the interplay between themselves and this thing. And so in order to stay securely in this state of being, right, and emanating and expanding from center as an artist, we need to get curious, and we need to put our attention on something specific that we're trying to accomplish, right? So in a song, I always say, a song is not a presentation, it is a conversation between yourself and actually one other person. Like, what works best from a performance perspective is having one point of focus. So like the Beatles, I Want to Hold Your Hand. It's like, I so badly am crushing on you that I am going to throw caution to the wind, and I may get rejected, but I have to ask you if you'll just hold my hand. So my objective, my focus is, how can I say this in a way that's not going to make you think I'm a freaky stalker? And, and like get them to say yes and fulfill this desire that I have to be closer to this person. Right. So if I'm saying that, instead of thinking about hitting notes and remembering lyrics, but I'm saying like, oh my God, like, I'm going to tell you something. I hope you'll understand. Yeah, I'm going to hold your hand. Like, that allows that communication to be so connected organically to your emotions, to your heart, to your desire, that it puts you in a real-time situation that allows the notes to be exactly how they need to be, that allows the breath, that allows the moment to be as it needs to be. And so focus on what is really going on emotionally in the song and what you're trying to accomplish in the song, for me, is the key that unlocks the door to the quantum field, to like everything that's possible, because now you're just having a private conversation. And that leads you to room C, which is the creator space, where you're able to account for all the technical stuff. You're able to watch yourself peripherally. You're able to be in this state of centered curiosity and engaged in this communication. But you can also like juggle 17 balls at the same time, because you can do all that at once. That's room C.
Mm-hmm. Room C is the technical aspect.
No, room C is when you can add that back in without getting knocked off your perch. Room A is when you're watching yourself and you're worried about the technical, you're worried about the process, you're judging yourself, and it's all very mechanical. Mm-hmm. And room B is when you're letting go of all the technical concern and you're just putting your attention on focusing on the communication and the truth of what you're saying. And room C is when you put those two ingredients together and you're just able to like be tapped into the field, tapped into the quantum, like in the zone.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So it's like the technique and the emotion meet and you're in command of both, or is it
in
that
room
yeah,
C.
yeah, room
Yeah,
C and room C.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that's where we all want to be. We all want to be Michael Jordan on the basketball court. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, so learning how to get past, and it all actually, like, can I tell you like a little story about um myself and how I have come to like have this philosophy that I use for myself and for all my clients. Um, I had like 4 earthquakes happen in my life at once, just about 12, 13 years ago. And I took to the woods and I just started walking and walking. And I was writing in my little iPhone 5S, just essays and observations. And I was just like connecting to nature. And I really started to download stuff that I had never um, learned in books or learned anywhere before externally. I started to understand quantum physics. I started to understand sacred geometry. I started to observe patterns, visual patterns that corresponded with the Fibonacci sequence and the golden mean. And like, I started to understand the relationship between what I was experiencing in life and what I was observing from a scientific perspective. It was crazy. And I'd go home and I'd Google and I'd be like, how did I know all of this?
Mm-hmm.
And so what I discovered when I started to research how this related to what I do and what I love the most was that what gave birth to the field of quantum mechanics was this idea that when you're being observed, when electrons or protons were being observed, they stopped behaving like waves and they went back to being particles, right? And you can research this by Googling the double slit experiment,
Mm-hmm.
and that'll explain that whole phenomenon, what gave way to like, okay, there's more here going on than just physics. And so I put together in my mind, like, wow, as artists, we kind of collapse our magic when we know we're being watched. When we're rehearsing, when we're by ourselves, we're just magic and we're rock stars. The minute we even just get in front of a mic or a camera and there's no one even there, we go into room A and we start behaving mechanically and clunky and everything falls apart. So really what's going on is whatever's happening on a subatomic level in this microsphere is happening on a macro level when it comes to being able to share this level of magic and these intimate gifts that we are given as artists and that we develop with others puts us into that collapse of the flow state. So the whole game is, how do I stay in the quantum? How do I stay in the flow state as an artist when I'm in front of other people being observed? How does that not disappear? And that's the body of work that I have put together over the last 30 years. Is like, how do you do that and shine brighter than you can imagine in front of other people and create that kind of connection with your audience? It's like falling in love times however many people are in the audience.
Yeah, and the problem that I have is well, so when you practice, and depending on which instrument you play, I'm sure this applies to singers. There's a lot of technique involved. You have to work on the scales, the technical aspects. So you're not necessarily thinking emotion while you practice, right? You're mainly thinking technique and just getting through the hoops of actually playing your instrument. So how do you then, when you go to perform, bring the emotion in? I mean, do you have to actually practice that way? Because I know you're talking about room B and adding emotion and story and kind of like stepping into the movie of what you're doing and then adding the emotion in. How do you practice that? Do you actually have to practice it so it comes out on stage? I mean, is this something you should be doing every single day? Adding room B type practicing?
Million percent. Like for
Hmm.
me, it's never just about the technical. Like if
Yeah.
there's always a movie going, um there's always a narrative of me and my life. And that's where it goes back to that first question about the character, right? Like you're always being that character. So even when you're practicing something that's monotonous, if you're imagining like some kind of story in your mind while you're doing that, that heightens the physical technical experience When you're emotionally connected, it's like plugging the plug into the socket. When you're just doing the technical, repetitive stuff, it doesn't have anywhere near the horsepower. It's just going through the motions, and it's annoying. And it's and I'm sure, like, haven't you seen like some of these young kids that play the violin and everything is technically perfect, but there's no hair standing up on the back of your neck? So for me, this is the big myth that people think, well, you have to do it this way, and it's all about the technique and the mechanics up into a point, and then you're suddenly just supposed to be able to feel natural and emotionally connected. My methodology that I discovered for myself as a singer and as a writer and as a teacher is that's always the foundation of the technical repetitive practice. There's got to be a way for you to figure out some kind of little fairy tale in your head about why you're doing it, how you're doing it, what it's enabling you to do, so that if you can be emotionally invested in the smallest task in your life, not just in your performance. If you could be really emotionally invested in cleaning the bathroom, like, how much better would life be, and how much cleaner would the bathroom be? And most of us
Yeah.
hate doing that, So like the answer is always, all the time, figure out how to emotionally invest in the process of whatever you're doing.
Yeah, amazing. So when you're playing scales, when you're singing scales, put some emotion into it, and then that will translate over. It's not
I
like a
don't
dry.
sing
Yeah.
scales or play scales.
Yeah.
Honestly, like, if I'm
Yeah.
really 100% transparent, I'll find a singer that I'm in love with and I will sing along with exactly what they're doing.
Gotcha.
I'll
Yeah.
slow it down on YouTube and I'll figure out the exact run and I'll make it as slow as I have to hear all those intervals. And I'll do it over and over and over and over again just to crawl inside of vibrationally what they're doing, breath,
Hmm.
what they're doing, placement, what they're doing. Like, if I can figure out a way to romanticize any of these activities, it's just so much more effective and it's so much more fun. Now, I don't know how much this resonates with you because you've never done it this way before. And this may sound crazy to the majority of people that hear what I have to say. I
Yeah.
mean, how does it hit you when I say this?
Yeah. I mean, I've heard that from many different sources in terms of just learning from recordings and playing with recordings, and that's like a primary. A lot of jazz musicians talk about that. Learning music through recordings and trying to sink into the emotion of the recording for sure, and the feeling of the recording. But how do you achieve that level of engagement? I mean, say you're trying to learn a difficult, like, Mariah Carey run or whatever, and you have to repeat it many many times, like you were saying,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So
Yeah.
how do you make sure you're engaged on every single repetition? I mean, do you actually have to consciously put effort into being emotionally engaged each time you repeat, or does it become dry in some sense?
No, it never becomes dry. I always have, um, like, and this is one of the, like, 101, what I teach my clients is, like, in every single instance when you're singing a song, and even if I'm just singing a run in a Mariah Carey song, right? I'm singing Hero, or no, Butterfly. I love the song Butterfly. That's epic. Like, and she had a great, the original video with the horse and everything, and so, like, that creates an emotional engagement. But I'll pick someone that I would be saying these words to. I'll monologue that. Instead of singing it, I'll take it off the melody and I'll speak that lyric, having already decided who I need to say this to in real time. Is it my father, in heaven? Is it my dog Wookie? Is it my husband? Is it, like, who am I having this conversation with? And then when I'm practicing and I'm going over that part over and over and over and over again, it's like there's two different realities. There's learning the song and learning how to sing it. But the reality that I lean into is the reality of, I need to say this way. There's no other way to say this. And when I get to that part of the song and that run happens, even though there's no lyrics there, I'm still saying that to this person. And that's the most effective way I can transfer my energy in my heart to this person, is by making that sound happen, right? So every time I do it, and I'll go down the rabbit hole for hours on one section and never get tired, because every time I do it, it's just like another chance at bat, another chance to hit the ball out of the park. But it's the emotional attachment to what I'm saying that makes it so thrilling.
Hmm. So in a sense, and I think you were talking about this before, but you start with the end result. You start with the sound and the emotion that you want to achieve, and then the technique just happens in
Yeah.
that direction, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not even the sound. It's more, what is it that I'm trying so hard to say here?
Hmm.
And, you know, I found this to be true, and I saw this in the woods really, really, really clearly, is that most of us have our hearts closed a little bit. We're afraid to be vulnerable. We think it makes us look weak, feel weak, be open to be attacked or whatever. And that's fear, right? So when we're in a state of defensiveness or playing small, it's to keep our hearts and our spirits safe, right, from other people's bad intentions, criticism, whatever. And when we're in a state of fear of any kind, our vibration, our frequency is lower, much lower, and our window to be able to see more truth is smaller. So love, on the other hand, and I saw this when I was sitting and watching and looking at the sun shining on all these incredibly like diverse, all this foliage up in the mountains, and everything was just like in surrender, complete surrender to the sun. I was like observing how the sun just shines like this, and that's the reason that everything has come to life on the planet. All organic matter is the gift of the sun just giving itself. It doesn't shapeshift, it doesn't hold back its light because Jupiter's not being nice that day. It's just like, that's what it does, and that's the result, is everything comes to life. The planets stay in orbit. And so what I realized when I started diving into the quantum aspect of this was that, well, first of all, the electromagnetic field at the heart space is the biggest electromagnetic field in the human body. And the more we open that portal and reveal our truth and allow ourselves to be more and more defenseless, the more we open that window to the field, the more source comes out of us. And like the sun, we are able to give bigger and bigger gifts and more important gifts. And the more we attract, it creates that magnetism. So I teach, learning how to love in this manner means opening and expanding in every direction like the sun without hesitation. They get stronger and stronger in your ability to use that muscle of opening and watch what happens, because it becomes less and less dangerous. It becomes less and less frightening and sinister, because you start to actually experience how beautiful life can be when your heart is open and you're seeing the bigger picture. And then you have less and less need to shut down and play small. And that's exactly what happens with the electrons, right? They go back to being marbles instead of waves, because they're afraid that something will prey upon them, I imagine. And you know what the most interesting thing about this is? Crazy is that if it's the observer that's collapsing the wave function, who is the actual observer? Who would you say is the observer? Is it others?
Ourselves. Well, yeah,
You see
ourselves.
that? You
Yeah.
see that? It's
Hmm.
like a projection of our fear.
Hmm.
So there are physical people watching, but it's us preemptively watching ourselves that shuts down the access to source, the access to God, to the universe, however you frame that, like, because we're afraid of what they're going to think.
Hmm.
as opposed to like, if you're in this state of love and flow and like the quantum, like you're just source is shining through you and you are on your game and you're nailing it and you're doing exactly what you want to do in terms of communicating, you can have all the haters in the world in the audience and it won't matter. It will not interfere with your mastery and your level of technical achievement, like, because it doesn't really have anything to do with you. Like, nothing is going to change the sun from shining the way it shines. And it's us learning how to get into that state of, you know, balance and stability in the center of ourselves so that we can open this portal and we can like let all that beauty come out, because we're no longer afraid that someone's going to harm it. Like, it's, if it's God, like, that doesn't need any defense. It doesn't need any protection. It's the greatest force field in the world. But we're so in room A as a civilization, as a species, we're so in room A in everything we do that we're constantly playing with this tiny little opening. Like, we're looking through the peephole and we wonder why it's not easy, and we wonder why it's not joyful, and it's not, you know, everything we hope it can be. You know, think about this, when we fall in love, when we have a baby, when we get a new puppy or a kitten, it's like the colors change. It smells different, it tastes different, it feels different. You want to wake up and jump out of bed in the morning. And that's because your heart is open and you're experiencing the quantum possibility of what love really feels like, you know? And so my mission is like, not just through my music and my voice, but through enabling as many other artists as possible to step into the center of themselves, open this portal, open this window, and start experiencing what it really feels like to be alive and to express the truth and to change the opposite end of the spectrum that seems to always gain control over the world. This low frequency, you know, fear mongering. We're getting a great example of that right now, which we won't get into that conversation, but like the powers that be that always wind up being the dominant force on this planet throughout the, you know, the millennia, have always been operating and dealing in fear because they know how to shut us down and deactivate our power. If we are coming from this place of love, that doesn't just mean everything is all sunshine and rainbows. That means I'm not shutting down for anybody. I'm opening my full capacity to tap into as much truth and as much, you know, when you have a huge access to truth, you can come up with solutions that haven't been presented before. You can solve problems that haven't been solved before. You can come up with new ways to govern and new ways to feed people and to care for people and to educate people. You know what I mean? Like, there are solutions that we haven't even begun to tap into because everyone is kept in this small little, you know, fishbowl of fear. And we only think we have these limitations. And every once in a while, when we fall in love or we have a few drinks or we get high or whatever, we taste what it feels like to be in that quantum state. But I pose that if you learn how to open your heart in this way, you learn how to operate from room B and then room C on a regular basis, that you can operate that way all the time. And life can be literally, this isn't hyperbole, but you can literally have a life of magic because you're manifesting these quantum phenomena by staying open and staying in a state of love.
So this starts with just changing how we operate day to day. So being more present, injecting emotion into everything we do, and just living in the present. You know, because it's not like it's not like you can snap your fingers and you become this new person. It just this is a process that probably takes a little a little bit of a time, right? But then you can kind of get acclimated to it and start to become a new person through the decisions you make every single day and how you live your life, correct?
Yeah, all the little habits. And,
Yeah.
it goes against everything we've been taught. Like all the big gurus, they say, oh, fear is just an inevitable part of life and you just have to muscle through it. And it's like the old school masculine energy approach.
Hmm.
But like, how much do we spend every year at the gym as a country, for example? Like, how many billions of dollars, right? Training the muscles, So, like, this emotional and mental muscle of learning how to, it's not so much as injecting emotion as it's allowing, right? Allowing yourself to feel, allowing yourself to love, to admire, to wonder, to give without being transactional and wondering what you're going to get back for. Like, when you learn how to just be in the flow like the sun, where it's going out, it's giving, 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 right? You prime yourself for more and more and more manifestations. When people talk about the law of attraction, that's what we're talking about.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And this requires an incredible amount of awareness. I feel like you have to just constantly be aware from moment to moment what's happening in your head. I mean, the thing about nowadays, I mean, I don't know if you've experienced this with students, but everybody's distracted nowadays. They're of two minds, meaning that if you're on your phone a lot, it's like you're not really there. And then when you put the phone away, a lot of times the phone is so addictive that you're still thinking about it even when you're not on it. You know what I mean? And people are just, especially young people, are distracted. I mean, how do we get back to just being present and then starting to work these things into our lives? And how do we get rid of all these distractions? Is it
Hmm.
just them?
Such a good question. First of all, when you think about this addiction, right, there's a chemical reaction, right? The dopamine that we get, the hits of dopamine we get because it's familiar. But if you really think about what's the impetus in the first place, this longing is connection. Like, we're looking for connection. I think if you break it all the way down, we're looking to connect, to find like-minded people, to find things that are beautiful, find ideas that we can use, that we can experiment with, other people that we can find tribes out there in the world. We've never had, in all of human history, we've never had the ability to speak as peoples of the world to each other this directly, right? So if we can learn how to recognize that it's the connection that we long for, and that's where the dopamine is really its most potent and beautiful, right? Then I think that's an important first step. I can't tell you how to solve this epidemic of addiction that we all suffer from to one degree or another, but I can tell you that learning how to find joy in moment-to-moment things, learning how to get out, making a priority of getting out and moving your body and being in nature once a day somehow, even if it's walking through your own backyard and just taking a half hour to notice what kind of leaves are on each of the different plants and why do you think they're that way, and look at the different colors and just presence yourself into the moment. You start to see little miracles everywhere, and you start to feel like those rusty hinges on your heart start to kind of creep open. And it's like you presence yourself back in with connection to all these little beautiful details that are all around us, right? And lose yourself to just those moments of beauty. Like, that is more soul nourishing, I think, than any meditation you can do. And I think meditation is great also, like just literally taking 10 to 20 minutes a day, closing your eyes and just focusing on your breathing. You don't need a mantra. You don't need to get mad at yourself if you drift off or your mind goes elsewhere. You just gently bring it back. I'm just going to focus on my breath. But like, I used to do all of these, like, for years. I want to say like 3 straight years, walking meditation in the woods while writing was like being on another planet. And I wound up with 3,000 single space type pages of essays, of observations, of gold, like treasure that I would find up there that I already knew somehow. Somehow I knew that just by observing it. It was like I was downloading it from the cloud, and I was like as shocked as I was thrilled, and then I'd just come home and I'd be like, here's some diamonds and emeralds and rubies from the woods. Take it because it's burning my hand. This doesn't belong to me. This is to be shared. And then my students were like, their lives would change. Their happiness would change. Their relationships would change. Their voices would change. And most of the time we weren't really concentrating on the technical, believe it or not.
Yeah. So you weren't going for a walk with a podcast, in your ear. You were just going for a walk and just observing. So because you see a lot of people walking around nowadays, they're listening, they have those earbuds in, they're like listening to stuff. They're just they're not really present to their environment, right? So it's like, do you recommend just like leaving the phone at home and just getting out there and just like thinking, going through what? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, you really you have to explore this for yourself because everybody's different. But for me, I would put on like yoga music,
Oh, gotcha.
or some kind, like I have Dominic Miller radio, like I would use Pandora, right? So Dominic Miller station had all these amazing, like really beautiful guitar songs with no vocals. And it's interesting because I'm a vocalist that I was usually never listening to singers. I was just listening to instrumental music that just became like the soundtrack for the miraculousness of the woods, right? And it was just kind of like added some rhythm, added some texture and sounds that just amplified like any great soundtrack does in a film, right? So again, I'm creating an experience, an emotional experience for myself by having that music in there. And then I would always take my phone for that reason, and also because that's how I would write. So I'd get an idea and I would just be like, I'd just start writing. And sometimes I would stand there for like a half hour, 45 minutes, just writing and writing and writing and writing. And then I would be like, what just happened? Like it was like channeled down into me. And it felt like I would go up into the woods every day. And I remembered this visual, like I remember it feeling like I have like 20 wet wool coats on my shoulders. And as I'm just ascending into the woods and I'm starting my walk, like there goes one, there goes another. And like, no matter how many times I did that, I'd go back down into LA. And I was living in LA at the time. And like the next morning, there were the coats, the wet wool coats, just heavy on me. And then as soon as I just connected back to the divinity of all of it, like every little bit of it, the wind, the bird. I used to watch the crows, like they'd fly in pairs. And I remember thinking, I'm going to find my partner that I can fly through the sky with like that. And wound up finding him. That's another whole story, like almost 3,000 miles away. Just like, and we've been in bliss. We just had our 10-year anniversary. From being in this state, I was able to manifest the most beautiful partner that it was beyond what I had ever dreamed of. And like, so creating and setting the stage emotionally, again, creates the dopamine that you're looking for, and why so many people are trapped in this web, this sticky web of, social media platforms. And that is the perfect state for propaganda and for any agenda to just stick in our subconscious mind. So when you're in the woods and you're listening to music and you're creating this beautiful experience for yourself, the stickiness of that web is like pure pleasure, pure enlightenment, pure connection to source. So that's the kind of connection that's going to connect you back to everything you've ever wanted, because it's going to help you become the person and the artist that you seek in others. And that's why I found Matthew, is because I wasn't looking for someone to complete me anymore. It wasn't like, I need someone, I want someone. It was this opposite flow, again, like the sun shining out, where it was like, I am finally enough of a gift because my heart is so open and I want to share my love so much that I want to be able to give someone all of this that I've discovered. And then I found exactly that puzzle piece.
Yeah.
Exactly. And there have been so many miracles between us that it's, it's people wouldn't believe it. I wouldn't believe it if I hadn't experienced it myself. So,
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think that's analogous to just being a musician too, because I used to feel this way a lot of times. It's like, why would anybody want to come listen to me? What do I have special to offer? It's just like, what makes me different from all the other performers out there? Why am I even up here? That kind of thing. And it's just like, yeah, then you're not gonna get what you're seeking, right? If you think that way, it's more just you have to realize your authenticity and then put that out into the world and realize that you do have something to offer, right?
yes. But
Yeah.
can I point out something right there?
Hmm.
This will give you a perfect example of room A. So, because this is what we're all doing. And I'm doing it too, because it's subconsciously programmed. So, like, the more you become aware of it, like when you should, have your chest out and your shoulders back, it's like, if you stop thinking about that and the more you think about it, the more you're going to program your body to do that naturally, and then it becomes default. But when you said, I'm going to misquote you, but generally like, I'm wondering if I'm good enough. I don't know what other people are thinking, right? You see how you're in room A. You're not being, you're imagining what it looks like to others. You see how, like, it's just like embedded, like we don't even think of it. But the minute you start realizing, oh, that just means I'm not in my perspective, I'm in an imaginary perspective. How can I drive the car from outside the car? Right? So once we just realize that and we go, okay, so how can I be interested in the person I'm talking to in the song? Like, it's almost a split reality. Like I said before, it's like, sometimes I describe it like a fish tank. Like, there's the larger fish tank, right? That's the, let's say you're performing, that's the venue, that's the seats, that's the audience members, that's the stage, the mic, the other musicians, the notes, the lyrics, right? The vocal apparatus. Oh, I better be a good singer. So it's like you're kind of like sitting on the sidelines taking notes and watching your singer, saying they better not mess up. And it's this technical, fearful, critical, like, assessment going on, right? But then if you drop a snow globe into that fish tank, and inside that snow globe is just a private conversation that you're having with one other person in your mind, and you get up on stage and you're now detached from being a singer, and you're just Nick having a private conversation with someone then that there's some urgency to, that you want someone to get something, and there's no space in your mind to be thinking like the singer anymore.
Hmm.
There's just having this private conversation and trying to get what you want, trying to get that person to hold your hand, right?
Incredible. Yeah.
Right. And so, yeah. So if you can do that, all the noise goes away, all the self-doubt goes away, because you're no longer performing for others. You're trying to carry, and that's another thing, performing, right? People think performing means to entertain, whereas there's another definition, which just means to carry out a task. So if your task is to get this person to hold your hand, and that's all you're focused on, nothing else exists. And that's when your voice will rise into, technically, what carries the emotion that will get them to say, or your best shot at getting them to say yes.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I've heard Sinatra, Sinatra's friends talk about this, how he treated a song as a script, meaning it's like a movie you have to step into and just live the movie, right? And don't think about the externals and judging your technique and whatnot. So I guess the more you can practice in that mindset, right, the more it's going to translate onto the stage, correct?
100%. It's
Yeah.
a whole new way of operating in life, which is why I created this body of work and why I have a worldwide community of artists. I call it the Artist Uprising, because it's teaching us how to rise into the truth of ourselves and be the truth of ourselves, and like how magnificent that turns out to be, but it's a practice, because it's kind of like going against everything that your nervous system has been taught how to respond to. Like, it's the opposite. It's like open, safe, you're safe, like, it's your subconscious mind has been so programmed to believe you're not safe, and that you need to shut down and you need to play small and keep your head down. And, it's like we've been programmed for how many centuries, right? So it's it's a rebellious act to step into the truth of yourself and open your heart and open your voice and share with the world in this way. But it's the most powerful thing you can ever do. And it's pretty freaking easy once you understand it and you get used to that habitual practice of it.
Mm.
And
Yeah,
it's amazing what miracles happen, like how many manifestations, just like how much your audience loves you and how incredibly fulfilling that is, to know that when you get out on stage, you don't have to be overcome by this, terror, or this, your palms dripping or your cheek quivering or your heart pounding out of your chest, half conscious. Like, you're fully conscious, experiencing love, and like, it's such a love fest. It's worth everything, So having been on both sides of this so deeply, right? It's like, for me, the only endeavor that you can undertake that will make all the other things get better. Like, it's the deepest level of foundational work you can do for yourself to be able to understand this concept, because every single relationship you'll ever have, including the one with yourself, is based on whether you're allowing yourself to be.
Yeah. Yeah, and the real icons in music, they are living their full selves, and that's why we love them, right? So, I mean, there's one question I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned Michael Jordan earlier, and being someone that grew up in Southern California, watching a lot of basketball, and watching Kobe Bryant playing. I was always amazed that he seemed to get better when the pressure was the highest, meaning like that clutch shot that had to go in for him to win the game. It seemed like it always went in because he almost got better with the pressure. The pressure fueled him in a way. I mean, where do you think that comes from in terms of when the pressure's at its highest? There's certain people like that feed off that energy and they rise even higher, versus letting that pressure bog you down and you kind of shrink. Where do you think that comes from?
First of all, that's where diamonds come from, right? Pressure like that. I see everything through this lens of room A, B, and C. So the more pressure there is for Kobe, how I used to perceive him and how I still do, is it forces the focus to be even more sharp.
Mm-hmm.
And everything else goes quiet. So that's room C. That's the ultimate room C. That's the zone. It's like it's the zeniest zen you can get. It's just like, the more important it is, the sharper your blade has to be, so that in those moments, you are so in the center of yourself and so focused on that basket, right? That your body just knows how to put it in there, like, because it's already been drilled in. And there's no luck to it. It's just, I already know how to do this. If I even slightly go outside of myself and question it, then to that degree, if I'm 3 degrees off because I'm 3% outside of the center of myself, then that's going to be 3 degrees off the basket, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to hit it. So when you have really become a master, all that means to me is that you've learned how to focus your attention and your energy so completely from self, from the center, from source, from the quantum field, from God, however you want to frame that, that you rise to the occasion. That's why I call it the artist uprising, because it's like you want to rise to the penthouse, to the pinnacle, to the top of the mountain, frequency-wise, emotionally, because that's the place that has the widest panoramic view. That's the place that has the most information for you to draw upon. And you have, like in quantum physics, they talk about being in superposition. Like you can have 1,000 different possible solutions to a problem, and the one that's the most efficient will show up in the physical universe. And like when Kobe or Michael Jordan or whoever can do that, it's because they are operating from the quantum field, and the quantum field is just saying, boom, this is the one that's going to work the best. And there's no mental distraction of room A, of doubt. There's not a shade of doubt.
And the focus is just supreme. It's like total focus on what needs to happen at that moment.
Right. And it's almost, it's not even like a mental, like they're not thinking in that state.
Mm-hmm.
They're just allowing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The thinking is in the prep. The repetitions are in the prep.
Yeah.
Right? You're conditioning your mind, your soul, and your body with this muscle memory of how it works. And then you're letting it all go and you're just being available. And I used to think when I was on my way up in the woods and those wool coats were falling off, I was like, I'm going to meet the oracle that lives in the woods, and she is me.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like the overarching feeling that I had when I'd come down every night. Like everybody has the capacity to meet the oracle within that has not necessarily all the answers in their brain, but that has access to the infinite possible answers, access to the infinite possible best thing that can come through, best note you could ever hit, best lyric you could ever write, best experience with the audience that you could ever imagine. It's because you're letting go of everything and allowing source to come through you and connect to the source within others. And one last thing, and I know this has been really kind of out there in terms of like talking about quantum physics. I hope I didn't lose you or anyone along the way. But do you know where quantum entanglement is?
Not exactly.
Okay, it's really a simple explanation. Like they've done experiments where you can take a proton and cut it in half and separate them. Like I know there was an experiment done where they like moved one 14 miles away and they could observe each one. And whatever they did to one happened simultaneously to the other. And that's called quantum entanglement. And there was a measuring device that registered 0 time, 0 time had elapsed between the and they project that this can be true 14 miles apart, this can be true light years apart, but that there's a innate connection. And I've heard it, I've heard this concept of like the Big Bang. When that happened, right before it happened, like the entirety of the universe as we know it was the size of like a green pea, very, very heavy green pea. And that when it broke apart and it's still expanding and traveling, that implies that we're all quantumly entangled, that every bit of us is entangled with every bit of everything else on this planet, animate and inanimate. But when you have your heart open and you're vibrating at a really high frequency, what's happening in my heart when I'm singing on stage or even recording is causing a quantum entanglement response in the audience that they are feeling in their heart and experiencing on some level exactly the transference of energy that I'm feeling, whether it doesn't even hit their brain or their intellect. it just is. So the greatest masters have had to be tapping into this, is my perception of this. It's all intuitive, but this is what I see and this is what makes sense to me because I've felt it. And like, this is my stat. Like, as an artist and as a teacher, people cry, like, all ages, all demographics, everything. Like, it doesn't matter how old, what language they speak. My students, like, I have a client right now, came to me because she couldn't emotionally connect. Every time she gets on one of our group calls, she's like, I don't know why I'm crying. I've been with my husband for 16 years and he's seen me cry maybe 5 times. Like, so there's something that's happening energetically that is a quantum connection. So what I'm saying is, when you learn how to open your heart this way, you learn how to get out of room A, and you learn how to operate from these concepts, you hardly have to do anything to move people, to connect with people. And there's your dopamine, and there's your record sales, and there's your relationships with other musicians that are also operating from that level. And, whether we're musicians or not, like, I believe we're all artists. We all have the capacity to be curious and to create with our imaginations. But if we can do it outside of the realm of fear and tap into this quantum power that we have access to, like, we can change the world. It's not just some hyperbole. It's like, we can, and we should, and we need it really fucking badly right now.
So if you're in room A and you're thinking about technique, you literally cannot make the connection. It's like the door's closed.
Yes.
It's like you can't even access the connection and connect with other people. Yeah.
That's, door's locked.
Yeah. Amazing.
Wow.
So, what would you say, so those of us that have not gone through this process, or maybe we haven't to an extent needed to really enter that state, and you step on stage and you start to feel, what's known as being nervous or diminishment or whatever, what would you tell people to start thinking about in that moment to kind of overcome it? Is there anything they can do when you're actually on stage, and you start feeling those types of feelings?
From a physical perspective, you want to take some deep breaths in through your nose, let it out through your mouth if you can. But I mean, it is a process. You know what I mean? Like, I would say DM me and we can talk about like baby steps. But I mean, it does have to do with learning how to focus your attention on creating a private conversation, because then you're tricking your mind and your brain into feeling privacy. Right? When we're in public, we automatically trigger that observer effect and we shut ourselves. We're thrown out of the quantum field. We're thrown out of the wave function and we're put into a mechanical state. And it's very clunky and it's very invalidating to us emotionally, because we know we're so much better than that. And then that makes us think more and watch ourselves more. So I would say, remind yourself that you are having a private conversation with one person in your mind, and do some preparation in advance. Like, sit down with your lyric and figure out, like, if I were saying this right now out loud, because I am saying this when I sing, like, let's not forget, you are actually creating a communication to the universe every time you sing a song. Who would I say this to? Lock it in, make it real, make it personal. Okay, I would really say this to my ex because he'd done me wrong and I want him to go jump off a bridge. Like, if you arm yourself with a backstory and a narrative, and then you imagine actually speaking those words to that person, and you imagine the look on their face, and you realize what the stakes are. I put it with, like, I have a step-by-step process. It's the what, it's the who, and it's the why. So it's like, what am I saying here? Like, what am I really saying? Me personally, like, if I Want to Hold Your Hand was my song, right? I might say that to my dog, right? Because I went away for 2 days and now he's upset with me. So, like, I would picture Wookiee and I would say those lyrics to him in a way that would hopefully get him to forgive me and give me his paw, right? figure out who you would say that thing to in that moment, right? Not in your past. Don't go back to having a conversation with your high school sweetheart back when you were 15. Like, pick something that is present that you could actually speak to right now, right? I remember, and then just to finish that thought, then you figure out who it is, and then you figure out, why is this important to me? So like, I had a performance a few months back at a political event, and I was singing "God Bless America," and I remember thinking to myself, like, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual, but if I were talking to God, because that's who that song is, it's a prayer to God. God bless America, right? For me, it could be I'm talking to the universe, right? Or I'm talking to whoever, whatever. Like, for me, it was like the concept of, if someone's actually looking down, or if the universe is listening, like, here's what I want. I'm putting in my order. Please bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above, and then, like, I would just expand on, I'm having a private conversation and I'm asking for something specific because I'm really scared of what's going to happen if this goes the wrong way, right? And so people were just like going out of their minds after this. They were coming up to me and just saying, like, that's the best performance I've ever seen of that song. And like, I was crying. I mean, this luncheon, it was, it was like, the impact was because I was having a very emotionally invested private conversation in the song. And what winds up happening is every single person in that room became God. So even though I'm visualizing somebody, like if I would sing into Wookiee and I'm visualizing his little face, right? Everyone in the room would feel like how Wookiee would feel if I were saying that to him. So you get to like kind of have this virtual experience of like changing your audience into someone that you feel safe talking to, or that you have a vibrational, true relationship with. So you can be grounded in the truth of that relationship and just like, this is what I'm saying, and this is who I'm saying it to, and this is why it's so important for me. And you just keep focused from that perspective. You see how there's no room for like, how do I sound? Am I going to forget? The minute you feel your thoughts and your attention going there, you got to get it back on to like, what am I trying to accomplish in this conversation?
Yeah.
Right? It's not singing, it's communication. It's
So
not playing. It's
yeah. So the process is just getting good at, once your mind strays, like he said, to technique or how do I sound, it's just bringing it back and doing that over and over again till you get really good at it, and that just becomes who you are in the end, right?
in the
In
end.
essence, yeah.
Yeah. Easier said than done, which
Yeah.
is why like I created this whole thing, because like it's harder than walking a tightrope really high up in the air, because we're so conditioned to just default to all the other thoughts.
And is this what, this is what great artists can do, right? Because I mean, you'll see people performing, for example, at the Super Bowl or whatever, and a lot of people, when the numbers of people watching you expands, for example, playing for thousands of people, the pressure expands exponentially. But it feels like, in what you're saying, is a great artist can really just, no matter how big the crowd size is, it's like they're still inside themselves, inside that conversation, like you're saying, and it doesn't matter how many people are watching you, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Because
So.
ultimately, let's say there's 100,000 people in the audience, in the stands, right? You're really technically singing to one person at a time at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So you're speaking to each individual heart. And if you're connected to why you're saying it and what that means to you, then you're going to create that quantum entanglement effect with each individual person. Each of those 100,000 people are going to feel something in their heart that they haven't felt in a really long time. And that's what will separate you from the average singer who can do everything technically beautifully, but you don't feel that thing, right? For me, I never want to be anything but stunning to my audience, not because of ego, but because I owe it to them to feel that. And if I don't feel it, then they're not going to feel it. And if I'm all worried and anxious, then it's about me, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if
Yeah.
I'm focused on how to hold still, it's like Kobe, like everyone's counting on him to make that shot at the end under that pressure. If he's worrying about himself, he's never going to make that shot. But instead, he just surrenders. So I got this. I'm the
Mm-hmm.
hero for this moment, and just boom. And then everyone feels things that they like. The jubilation of those moments is beyond description. It's
Yes.
emotional.
So it's like getting your ego out of the way, you step aside, and then the emotion and the story just flow through you, like you said, from the source or whatever you think it comes from, and it flows through you out into the quantum field, into the audience, right? So it's like removing your ego, stepping aside, and just letting it channel through, in a sense. It's like,
Exactly.
yeah.
It's like if you think about there's classical physics, which is dealing with the physical universe, the third dimension, as spiritual people refer to it, right? The physical universe of particles and things, right? And then there's this quantum universe or the spiritual realm, right? You're you're actually dissolving the physical and you're just playing in the quantum playground. You're bypassing all of those mechanics. And it's such a gift because our spirits recognize it. Everything inside our bodies recognize it as oxygen to the soul. It's like, yeah, that's who we really are. And we know it right away. You know, why people need to go have a drink before they meet someone or in a crowd. It's like you want to just relax and feel like you and not be watching yourself. All of that is room A. So this is just like you're eliminating the need to operate in the quantum, in the physical, and you're going straight to the gooey liquid center of everything that we long for.
Incredible. Well, I think that's all I got for you. I think this is just amazing, and it's just super enlightening, eye-opening, really. And for me, as like a classical musician that thinks a lot about technique, it's just like, just mind-blowing, really, because this is where we all want to get to as musicians. So super helpful. Thank you so much, Joy. Really appreciate
Yes,
it.
my absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me and asking all those beautiful questions.
Great. Thank you. Okay, we'll talk to you soon.